Have you ever woken up to nothing? No texts, no plans, no buzzing notifications, just stillness, just you. At first it feels calm, but then something unsettling creeps in. It's not the usual loneliness. It feels like you're slowly vanishing from the world, like maybe your presence doesn't matter to anyone anymore. That's the moment most men scramble to escape. But what if instead of running from the silence, you walked straight into it? What if that silence isn't a punishment, but a doorway, a path so few dare to take? You wake up, no buzz, no plans, nothing lighting up your screen, just silence, just you. And it's not the peaceful kind. It's strange, almost too quiet. And then it hits, a faint whisper of doubt, a pressure in your chest, an ache, not for company, but for proof that you matter to someone. That's the moment most men panic. They grab their phones, they text someone they shouldn't, they scroll through meaningless content just to feel connected. Because the world taught you that silence means something's wrong. That if no woman is texting, if no friend is calling, then maybe you're falling behind, maybe you're unwanted, maybe you're failing. But what if the silence isn't punishment? What if it's an invitation, a door that most men are too scared to open? You see, we were taught to fear solitude, but no one ever told us what happens when we stop running, when we stop chasing the noise and finally turn to face the quiet. Because here's the truth. The man who walks alone, not because he has to, but because he chooses to, isn't weak. He's dangerous. Why? Because he's building something no one can see, something internal, something unshakable. This message isn't for every man. It's for the ones who are tired of always being the last choice, tired of performing for acceptance, tired of shrinking to fit into places they've already outgrown. It's for the man who's done running and ready to rise. In a world drowning in opinions and desperate attention-seeking, the man who chooses stillness becomes unforgettable. This isn't isolation. This is reclamation. You're not escaping the world. You're returning to yourself. Too many men drift from woman to woman, job to job, shallow friendship to shallow friendship, chasing validation like it's air. But have you ever stopped and asked, what if I stopped chasing and simply sat with myself? What happens is transformation. Your mind sharpens, your voice deepens, your standards rise. And here's the paradox. The moment you no longer need others to see your worth, that's when they finally do. Before we move on, I want you to write one thing in the comments. I choose solitude to forge my strength. Not because it sounds cool, but because you're done hiding. You're ready to stop chasing and start becoming. Part 1. The fear of silence. You sit in the dark. No notifications, no plans, no one needing your time. Just the sound of your breath, and something heavier underneath it. Your thoughts. Most men don't actually fear being alone. What they fear is what solitude reveals. It's not the absence of people. It's the presence of truth. Silence isn't empty. It doesn't yell. It doesn't shame. It simply unlocks the vault. The regrets you've buried. The choices you've delayed. The versions of yourself you promised to become, but never did. And suddenly, they all come rushing back. Uninvited, unfiltered. That girl who disappeared without closure. That job you never applied for. That promise you whispered to yourself and quietly broke when no one was watching. You try to look away, but there's nowhere to hide now. No small talk to disappear into. No relationship to drown in. No performance to act out. Just you, and the truth you've been dodging for years. Now comes the real question. Will you finally face it or run again? That's why most men stay in motion, from woman to woman, from goal to goal, from screen to screen, not to build something, but to escape something. Not escaping her, not escaping them, escaping themselves. Because silence strips the mask. And when it does, you either shatter or awaken. At first, the silence is brutal. It tightens your chest. It amplifies every insecurity louder than any outside voice. You're not enough. You'll always be forgotten. Nothing you do really matters. But if you stay, if you breathe through the chaos, if you stop running, just for a moment, something shifts. You begin to realize you're still here. You're still breathing. You're still capable. Those thoughts, they're not who you are. They're echoes, old scripts. They knock, but you don't have to let them in. And that's when clarity arrives. Not with fireworks, not with drama, but with a calm certainty. You finally know who you are. You are not your past. You are not your regrets. You are not the woman who left. You are not the man who once failed. You are the man who stayed, the one who didn't flinch, the one who sat in his own fire and refused to look away. That's rare. That's powerful. That's what it means to be stoic. Growth doesn't start in the gym. It doesn't begin with books or podcasts or motivational reels. It begins in stillness. It begins the moment you decide that you're worth facing. You sit in the storm. You let it scream. You let it twist. You let it tear through every illusion you've built. And you stay. You don't fill the void. You let it exist. And in doing so, you reclaim something most men never even touch, inner command. From that silence, a new voice rises. Not loud, but steady. Not perfect, but real. And when you move again, you move with weight. Your words cut deeper. Your presence feels anchored. Not because you've changed the world, but because you've finally come home to yourself. Here's the truth. The world doesn't need more men who blend in. It needs men who can sit in silence and walk out with clarity. Because that man, he doesn't chase. He doesn't beg. He doesn't try to prove anything. He becomes seen. Because his energy doesn't ask, it declares. Part 2. Approval. Detox. Most men are addicted to something they can't see. Not alcohol, not drugs, not gambling, but something far more subtle. Approval. They check their phones first thing. In the morning. Not for information, but for validation. Did she reply? Did they like my post? Did anyone notice me? It seems harmless, but it's not. It's neediness disguised as connection, dependency wearing a smile, and the most dangerous part, it's invisible. No one warns you. There's no rehab, no intervention. But it eats at you, slowly, because it doesn't just affect what you do. It warps who you think you are. Bit by bit, it rewires your identity. You start shrinking. You say yes when every part of you wants to scream no. You laugh at things that aren't funny. You avoid silence, avoid honesty, avoid standing alone, just to avoid rejection. You think you're playing it safe, but really, you're playing it small. You trade your voice for comfort, your identity for applause, your freedom for belonging, and over time, that need to be liked becomes a prison. You decorate the walls with compliments, but deep down, you know you're stuck, trapped inside an image built by others, not the man you were meant to become. Here's the truth. Approval is a high. It hits quick, then fades. And like all highs, it leaves you needing more. More attention, more validation, more performance. Until one day, you burn out. Not because you're weak, but because you've been wearing a mask for far too long. And masks? They get heavy. But there is another path. It's not easy, but it's real. It begins with a detox. An approval detox. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes. You stop molding your opinions to match the room. You begin to ask yourself harder questions. Am I doing this because I believe in it, or because I want to be liked? That one question alone changes everything. You stop chasing quick yeses. You stop apologizing for having standards. You stop explaining yourself to people who never truly listened. At first, it feels like withdrawal. You feel the silence, the distance, and the voices in your head whisper, "What if they don't like me anymore?" But you sit with it. You breathe through it. You let that discomfort sharpen you. And then a new voice begins to rise. Not loud, not dramatic, but solid. Your voice, the one that's been buried under years of performance, the one that doesn't speak to be heard, but because it has to speak. And then the shift happens. You stop texting just to stay relevant. You stop laughing when it's not funny. You start honoring your time, your truth, your peace. People notice. They feel something different. A weight in your presence. A stillness in your eyes. You no longer need attention. You carry attention. That's the paradox. Because men who chase approval blend in, but men who choose themselves stand out. Not because they're loud, but because they're authentic. They know what they believe in. They know what they will and won't tolerate. And most importantly, they know who they are, even when no one's watching. That's the kind of man people remember. Not because he was flashy or loud, but because he was unshakable. The approval detox process isn't clean or easy. It costs you fake friendships, shallow smiles, temporary applause. But what you gain is everything. You gain respect, not because you demand it, but because you command it. You gain peace, not from hiding, but from standing firm. And you gain power, not through control, but through clarity. So ask yourself, are you still living just to be liked? Still adjusting who you are to keep others comfortable? Or are you finally ready to choose yourself? Because once you do, truly do, something shifts. You stop chasing. You stop explaining. You stop performing. You simply become. And the world can't help but notice. Part 3. Clarity through solitude. There comes a moment in every man's life when the noise begins to fade. No more pressure, no more constant opinions, no more expectations pounding in your ears. What's left is stillness. Not forced, not hollow, just quiet. And in that quiet, something powerful happens. The fog begins to lift. Not because the world changed, but because you stepped away from it. I turned down the volume of the noise. You tuned out the pressure to perform. You silenced the need to please. And finally, you could hear what had been waiting underneath all along. Yourself. You realize solitude is not isolation. It's restoration. It's the process of peeling back everything that isn't really you, so you can finally see what is. In the chaos, you were reactive. You were rushed. You were adjusting, conforming, performing, always checking to make sure you were doing it right by someone else's standards. But in solitude, you begin to slow down, to observe instead of react, to notice what you allow into your mind, your time, your soul. And then a shocking realization hits you. Much of what you believed was never yours. The goals weren't yours. The lifestyle wasn't yours. Even your definition of success was given to you by someone else. And all this time, you've been chasing a version of life that never actually felt like home. When you pull back, when the feed goes quiet, when the phone stays down, when your weekends aren't crammed with noise and distractions, something new begins to surface. Clarity. You begin to ask better questions. No longer, what do people expect from me? But instead, what do I truly want? What gives me energy? What drains me? Who do I become around certain people? And do I actually like that version of myself? Solitude gives you the space to face those questions. Without noise, without pressure to answer fast, without needing anyone's approval for your answers. You sit in it. You feel what's been buried. You breathe through what's uncomfortable. And slowly, the mirror begins to clear. You stop pretending you're okay with things that don't feel right. You stop tolerating connections that feel hollow. You stop lying to yourself just to avoid discomfort. And you begin to live in alignment. Not perfect, but real. Not polished, but honest. You start saying no without guilt. You create space. Not because you're cold, but because you're finally discerning. You start cutting ties. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. Solitude doesn't just clear your head. It sharpens your sight. You become intentional. You no longer wake up just to survive the day. You wake up with direction. Your routines begin to reflect your actual goals. Your circle begins to mirror your values. Your environment becomes a reflection of who you really are, not who you were, pretending to be. And then something deeper shifts. You stop explaining your choices to people who were never trying to understand you. You don't need to argue. You don't need to prove. You just live, and your life speaks for itself. That's when it hits you. You are no longer available for drama, no longer vulnerable to manipulation, no longer influenced by surface-level noise. You've become rooted, and with that rootedness, you become immovable. People may disagree with you. They may misunderstand you. They may even walk away. You rooted yourself in who you truly are. No more debates. No more needing to explain. You stood firm because for the first time in your life, you're no longer living for others. You're living in alignment with the man you were always meant to become. That's the greatest gift of solitude. It burns away the distractions. It burns away the noise. It burns away the false versions of you that never truly belonged. And what's left is a man with peace in his chest and purpose in his stride. He doesn't speak to impress. He speaks because his words matter. He doesn't chase. He builds. He doesn't need to be understood. Because now he understands himself. So if your world feels quiet right now, don't panic. That silence isn't emptiness. It's an invitation. It's life whispering to you. Slow down. Listen. You don't need more attention. You don't need more likes, more messages, more validation, or more shallow connections. What you need is more stillness, more solitude, more moments alone where you finally come face to face with the man you've ignored for far too long. Yourself. The man who walks alone. He isn't broken. He's rebuilding. He's not running from the world. He's returning to his center. Refining, sharpening, burning away everything that was never his to carry. He doesn't move like someone waiting to be chosen. He moves like a man who has already chosen himself. And when you become that man, life begins to align. The right people stay. The wrong ones fade. And opportunity? It doesn't need to be chased. It finds you. That's not magic. That's mastery. If This silence has stirred something deep inside you. Don't just scroll by like it's another video. Drop a comment below and answer this. What's one distraction you're ready to let go of today? Then hit like, not because you were entertained, but because something in you just woke up. And if you're ready to build not noise, not popularity, but clarity, discipline, and quiet strength, then subscribe to this channel. Because here at The Stoic Spirit, we don't chase approval. We build men who lead from the inside out.